deboned my thighs, but I left the bones in my drumsticks and the bones in my chicken wing. And here's my mise en place. If you want to get a little closer on this here, you're more than welcome to. I already laid it out as far as like how I want to add it to the skillet. So that's buttered, and I got my bacon lardons, which are strips of bacon. I got my shallots finely diced, as well as a little bit of garlic in there. My mushrooms are quartered or wedged, more or less. I don't want to have slices or anything like that in there. Have a little bit of white wine. You can also use red wine, but white wine works as well. A little bit of dark chicken stock or chicken demi that I use for it, and then of course heavy cream, right? That goes all in those increments. And then at the end, I'm going to add some tomato concasse, which I left the skin on, which is fine. I just don't want to have the pulp in there. And then some fresh chopped parsley. And then also a little bit of water that I need. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and heat my pan up, of course, give it a nice heat. I don't want to use a high heat all the time. I just want to start my chicken out at a nice browning, and I want to render out more or less the chicken skin. So I don't want to have a chicken skin that is kind of rubbery or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and season this with salt and pepper from both sides. And you can use white pepper. Be careful with that. And you can use also, if you want to, a little bit of black pepper, coarse grind, just to give it a little kick, a little bit. And then you want to season that from all sides, of course, left and right. Salt. Pepper. Or black pepper. I make sure that I kind of drench it really good in it, so it's all seasoned in all levels. Pick up all that salt and pepper. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my butter comes up to kind of heat. I don't want to burn that butter, of course. When it kind of gets bubbly like this, that's when I start laying in my skin side first, just to make sure that I render all that fat out and all those flavors come out. As you can see, I took the bone out, spread that out a little bit. There we go. As soon as I have it in and it's nice and getting brownish a little bit, I'll turn it down to medium heat so I really get a nice rendering going on and not just getting it dark and brown, okay? So it's not supposed to be just dark and high heat, a little rendering so the chicken gets crisp and nice and flavorful. Okay, that's gonna take a couple minutes. I'm gonna take my salt and pepper, use it later on for seasoning my sauce. As you can see, I try to keep my plating station always kind of clean so I can plate up over here and cook over here. I got plenty of room over here to cook. Okay? Good. Anything I don't need gets clean, goes away. Alright, so we'll just brown it from all sides. As you can tell, it's not on super high heat, so it's not going to burn. And make sure that it gets nice and colorful. That's all what we want. I have my oven at 350 degrees, so I'm going to go ahead and later on place it when it's nice and brown here on here. And about that size of chicken, about 12 to 13 minutes at 350, just to get it done all the way. And then I'll place it in a warming holder when I get to plating up to make sure that it's really resting a little bit and getting done all the way inside and it's not any way raw or underdone. I'm sure we want to measure temperature. Temperature would be at 165 for a minimum of 15 seconds, right? That's the law, so we want to make sure that happens. It's brown a little bit. Give it a little bit, a couple seconds. I'll move it around a little bit because pans and heats always have different hot spots. So this way you can get it evenly browned and not just dark on one side and then kind of pale on the other. Try to get it brown from all sides. Once it's nice and brown like this here, we'll turn it around. Might have to turn it around again just to kind of render it out a little bit more. Make sure that all that fat from the skin is part of the seasoning and not just, you know, a rubbery skin. Be a little bit higher, not a whole lot. You have to play with the heat a little bit because, you know, like I said, high heat is not really because you don't want to burn it off. You want to make sure that it's nicely seasoned and nicely browned, and as well nicely rendered out. Try to brown these even on the bottom a little bit, so this way they get a lot of flavor off. And that takes a couple minutes, of course. As you can see, it's not really getting super dark over there, right? It's just nice and brown, colorful, nice Maillard reaction, of course. And that's where the flavor is. That's where all that stuff comes from. So there's a purpose on all that stuff. So once it's nice and colorful like that, then we'll just place it on here. All right. There we go. There we go. So we'll place that in our oven. Like I said, this size of chicken, about 12-13 minutes. I'm of course going to double check it. Now I'm going to take my lardons and render those out. I got a little bit more because I'm doing multiple portions here. Turn that out too a little bit. I want that bacon to render out, that's for sure. But the right amount of bacon is, you know, it's saltiness, and you don't want to add too much salt to it. But plus you want that flavor in there, kind of mellow out and be equal to all of that. Render that out a little bit. We don't want to get it too crisp. We don't want to get it like bacon bits or anything like that, because we still have a couple applications to it that will help us. You can already smell the fragrance of all that, right? Now I'm going to add a little bit of butter just because I want that fat to be there, because I really want my mushrooms and my onions to kind of, you know, get a little bit of color too and a little flavor. I'm going to add this is my shallots and my garlic. Just translucent, a little bit of heat, no color on that. A little bit. So you can see right now there's a lot of fat in there, right? And you'll see that those mushrooms soak that fat up pretty quick. And now we're going to turn it up a little bit. I'm going to add all of those mushrooms. Okay. Well, maybe a little bit more, yeah. Because you want to have a equal amount, or you want to have a decent amount of kind of everything in there, so it doesn't taste just lopsided towards bacon or mushrooms or too much of this, too much of that. It should be like a nice spread of all of it. So I turn up the heat, because what I want to do is I want to give those mushrooms a little bit of color, and I don't want to stir them too much so they kind of get a light browning to it, a little bit of Maillard reaction. There's nothing worse than the mushrooms just cooking in there, because they're going to lose a lot of water because they absorb a lot of water. They're going to lose a lot of water. If I move that a lot, it's going to just kind of bubble and cook here. What we want is like really saute in there and make sure that they get a good light browning, okay? You can tell when it kind of crystals like that, and then it's good. And you can see that my bacon is still whole. It's not fully rendered out because with that here, with my mushrooms and all that other stuff in there, as far as like my shallots and all that, and the butter, it will kind of help the mushrooms render and the bacon finish up the render at the same time. You can see a little browning going on with the mushrooms. That's where the flavor comes from. Okay, so a little bit. Then once all those mushrooms are browned like this here a little bit, then we're going to deglaze it. We'll deglaze it with a little bit of white wine. And then we'll deglaze it. Still tell that everything is full as far as like the mushrooms and the bacon, and then we'll take just a little bit of that chicken demi or chicken stock, ground chicken stock. Oops, didn't want that. And that to a boil. Now we're going to go ahead, once it's boiling really good, make sure that everything is good. Now remember that that chicken espagnole or chicken demi, chicken brown stock, thickened stock is actually thickened up with a little bit of roux, right? So this way, when it reduces, it will kind of break real easy on you, and it will break into fat and water, of course, or fat more or less. Water will evaporate. You go ahead and add a little bit of cream. Cream is very heavy too. This cream has got about 36% of fat in there, so that's a lot of fat. But once you got it there, that's when you turn it off. Okay, so now you turn it off. Your sauce is basically more or less done, or refirming. So you can let it sit there, but don't let it cook any longer because it's going to reduce. Basically just break down all the mushrooms or whatever you have in there. Shortly before we serve, we're going to add our tomato concassé and our fresh parsley. Refirm it, bring it up to temperature, and add it to it so it stays integrated. You got some more integrity on the texture, and the tomatoes are still bits and pieces and not just disintegrating in anything, right? So also what happens still sometimes is that it reduces down on you a little bit, right? And if it reduces down and it breaks up here on the side, sometimes you see some fat building up or whatever. That means that just water evaporated and the only thing you got left in there is fat, right? So what you can do is just add a little bit of water like this, and you can bring it back just to a sauce rather than to a bulk. You don't want it to be just a bulk or a melange of things, so you want it to be more or less sauce with all these integral pieces in it. So as you can tell, right now the sauce is basically done, except for the tomatoes and the fresh parsley, and maybe a little bit of salt and pepper for taste. But what I'm going to do is, like, my chicken steak takes about still 10 minutes easily, right? So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to finish up my chicken, and then finish everything else, and then I'm going to plate it up and show you how that goes, and we'll go from there. Sound good? My starch. I'm going to do a little coronet type of deal here. We're just going to go and drape it around like this so it doesn't look like a mountain of turd or whatever. And then of course our broccoli, we want to add here a little bit. Right. Always make sure that we show up our florets a little bit. There we go. And then we'll take the sauce, and then we'll make sure we take a nice amount down here of the mushrooms and the sauce on the bottom. And then we'll take our chicken breast, which has been Frenched, right? Try to clean that up a little bit so it just looks a little more presentable. some cases trim this down here a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and cut it in a slanger, just in the bias, like this. Try to fan that whole thing out a little bit so we can see the nice moist and juicy chicken breast, right? Hold it against here and just take that whole thing as it is right here and place it right on top. If we want to, we can take a little bit of sauce and just drape it around here a little bit, and maybe just nappe a little bit on top of here, and then we can make sure we'll just stand up that bone a little bit, expose that, and that's our whole chicken right here, chasseur. Okay.